in 200 years, people are going to be looking back at the year 2022 and going, man, those people had some of the most barbaric values. They were so unprogressive. How could people have thought this back then? I'm kind of obsessed with the future. It's always been something that I think very deeply about, and I'm often trying, through my reading of history, through my thinking of the present moment, I'm continually obsessing about what might be going on 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 300 years from now. It's also why I love any kind of science fiction. I'm deeply enthralled with the idea of the future. And I remember maybe 10, 20, 15 years ago, I had this dream that it's still very, very vivid to me to this day, where I was walking around and it was literally the year 2077. And there was all these young people out there, people who've not been born yet, so don't worry about where you are in this dream. No one's been born yet that's there, they're all young. Everyone's smiling, they're happy. And I had this idea in my head, in my dream, wow, humans have finally figured it out. Things are actually working in the world. We're actually getting along. We've actually overcome some of our ugliest parts of our nature. And, I think 2077 is a bit early for that, but that was my dream, and it was such a powerful dream. So what I'm thinking about now is, we get a lot of people in the world today who have this strange relationship to history. So they look back on figures from 50 years ago, 100 years ago, in a very disparaging way, as if they didn't have our woke progressive values that we have today. They supported causes that we never would support today. And so we kind of have, and we see this in movies, where we have to project onto them our 21st century values. And instead of trying to understand the past as it was, what really angers and really frustrates me here is this kind of, it is another form of stupidity, because I can guarantee you in 200 years, people are going to be looking back at the year 2022 and going, man, those people had some of the most barbaric values. They were so unprogressive. How could people have thought this back then, right? So have some humility, have some understanding that history is relative. And so I often think about what would be those values in the future where they would completely look down upon us in the present, so that you could have this perspective that I'm talking about. And I have two ideas. They might be completely wrong, because I'm often wrong, so I'm not saying this is for sure, but these are the two ideas that I have. One of them is on our relationship to animals. Now, for my book on the sublime, I'm doing a lot of research, and particularly I'm writing a chapter now about our relationship to other species, etc. And the great breakthrough in animal research of the past 30 years or so is that animals have consciousness, they have deep emotional lives. They're not these kind of experimental mice that B.F. Skinner used to experiment with, right? They have their own world, their own consciousness, their own emotions, right? Even frogs have this. I'm not saying ants or jellyfish do, but we know a hierarchy of particularly mammals, but even birds, etc., that have a very rich emotional life. And so I'm imagining 200 years from now, when we have fully mined this, we have understood, maybe we've understood the communication of dolphins and whales and bats. And it's not like King Solomon's ring where we'll be able to, or Dr. Dolittle where we can read their thoughts. But we've reached a higher level. And we're going to be going, my God, people were so ignorant back then. They didn't realize that these animals have deep emotional lives. They had these factories where they were killing chickens and etc. and pigs in the most inhumane conditions. Can you imagine how barbaric those people were back in the 21st century? The way they ate and treated animals on all these different levels. Maybe there may even be a movement to give animals certain rights, like people are trying to give to fetuses, etc., like that. We may have progressed so far in our relationship to the non-human world that we will think in a much different way about our relationship to animals. So there's this Indian physicist named J.C. Bose from the 1950s. You can Google this experiment. Great writer Aldous Huxley visited his lab in India in the 50s and he wrote about it. He did these experiments where he tried to show he could literally, we have these meters that can read the heartbeat and all of these other barometers for a living being. He created these instruments for detecting the equivalent of a nervous system and a heart system for plants, right? And he showed Aldous Huxley these graphs you could see in real time of a plant that was actually reacting in a happy manner to conditions, to sunlight, to water. And then at one point, he gave some chloroform to a plant which was poisoning, it was killing it. And Huxley was shocked. It was like going through these tremors like a human being would who was dying. And it looked to him like suffering, like the plant was suffering. And he was going, Huxley speculated that if people saw this, vegetarians might like no longer want to eat plants either, right? I'm not saying that we're going to reach that level in 200 years, but this is going to be one arena, one element of human knowledge that I think will advance and will make us of 2022 seem totally backward, totally unwoke. The other thing that I'm thinking of is the whole idea of nationalism. So if we humans are going to survive past this particular moment, we're going to have to deal with some very powerful global issues like global warming, like climate change, like the extinction of so many animals and species around this planet, which just isn't just an emotional, empathetic event. The destruction of species actually harms us in a very, very powerful way. And I could go on and on and on. Read anything by E.O. Wilson, who will explain in depth how when you kill diversity in the environment, it's very negative consequences. But in order to tackle these terrible problems, if humans are still around in 200 years, we will have had to work together on a global level, right? And I think people a couple hundred years from now are going to be looking back and going, my God, people were so wrapped up with their own little country, their own little worlds, their own little ethnicity in this one little corner of the planet. And here we are. It's not that there are no differences anymore. It's not that we've gotten rid of languages or culture, because we can still have both. But we're now able to think of all of us humans are in this together. I know that sounds like John Lennon's Imagine or something really sentimental, but it's actually the truth. We're actually all come from the same source. What seems to divide us ethnically, etc., racially, is an illusion. We all are the same. We are all human beings. And to the degree that we understand that we're in this together, that our fate is tied together, we will have progressed. So people, I think, in 200 years are going to be looking back on all these little strong ethnic nationalistic movements that people have, and their own little narrow identities. They're going to think, God, how barbaric, how backward for those people to be holding those kind of values. Now, as I said, I could be 100% wrong, and I could even go in the opposite direction. But I can guarantee you that in those centuries ahead of us, if we survive that long, people will be looking back at us in a negative way, in a denigrating way, in a way like, can you believe that people actually believe that? And so when you read a lot of history, it gives you a sense of humility, and it makes you think that maybe our ideas and values aren't as woke and progressive as we think they are. And so maybe we should be a little more forgiving when we read about people in the past.